I didn't plan to quit my job that night. I didn't even plan to raise my voice. I just wanted to do my work, keep my head down, and prove, mostly to myself, that I deserved the role they gave me. But there's a moment in every man's life when he realizes someone isn't just trying to slow him down, they're trying to erase him. And the second I smelled burnt plastic in my boss's office, I knew that moment had arrived for me. I'm not dramatic by nature. I'm the guy people describe as solid, quiet, dependable. The one who picks up the slack without complaining. The one who documents everything because someone has to. I don't have enemies. I don't create problems. I'm not the hero or the villain, just a guy who likes building things that work. So when they assigned me to the Atlas project, the biggest initiative the company had taken on in years, I treated it the way I treat everything, with precision. Long nights, early mornings, careful commits, meticulous documentation. It was the first time in my career I felt like the right doors were opening. My boss, Michael, didn't like that. He was one of those men who looks confident until you put him next to someone who actually knows what they're doing. A walking resume, loud in meetings, vague in reports, allergic to specifics. He liked being in charge of capable people because it made him appear capable by proximity. And he definitely didn't like that upper management had handed me the most sensitive part of the project instead of him. At first, it was small things. He forgot to forward me meeting invites. He'd tell me a deadline was Tuesday when it was actually Monday. He'd accidentally leave me off email threads, then ask where my updates were. I thought it was just sloppiness. People get messy under pressure. I get that. I didn't want to see patterns because patterns meant intent. And intent meant I had a much bigger problem. The first time I caught him rewriting my progress report, I still gave him the benefit of the doubt. Just smoothing out the language, he said, waving a hand casually over my keyboard like he hadn't just deleted 3 weeks of documented work and replaced it with inflated numbers and vague buzzwords. It felt wrong, but I swallowed it. I wanted peace. I wanted the project to succeed. I wanted to believe he wasn't threatened by me. But then came the day he asked for my company ID. He said they were updating Access. Normal enough. He even smiled, one of those thin corporate smiles that meant nothing. That night, I stayed late to fix a broken interface. My badge didn't work in the elevator, then at the side doors, then at the lab entrance. I tried every scanner in the building until security finally had to let me in manually. "You sure your ID didn't get damaged?" one guard asked. I wasn't, but I kept working. No reason to assume the worst, right? The next morning, I went straight to Michael's office. The door was cracked open. He wasn't inside, but the lights were on. Papers were scattered on the floor like he'd been digging through drawers in a hurry. And on his desk, still smoking, was a small metal tray, usually used to burn confidential documents. The smell hit me before I stepped all the way in. Melted badge plastic. The metal ring that used to anchor the lanyard was still intact, curled into a warped little shape at the bottom of the tray. He burned it. My ID, my access, my place in the project. And then he sauntered in like a man who owned the air. "Oh," he said, pretending to be surprised. "You should have told me you lost your badge. I found it outside the west entrance. Looked run over. Had to dispose of it. Security protocol." He said it lightly, casually, like we were talking about weather. I remember staring at him and thinking, he wants me gone. This isn't incompetence. This is intentional. "You know I didn't lose it," I said quietly. He shrugged. "Well, someone did." And then he leaned closer. Too close. Close enough that only I could hear him. "You're off the Atlas project until you get a replacement issued. Should be what? 2, maybe 3 business days? Take some time. Breathe. Let the team handle things." Let the team, meaning let him handle things. He walked out, humming. I stood in that office, looking at the tray, the burnt remains of the one thing that proved I had access, authority, legitimacy. Gone. Destroyed. And suddenly everything I'd ignored came into sharp focus. The rewritten reports, the skipped meetings, the sudden communication issues. the whispers that I seemed overwhelmed lately, the way he'd inserted himself into conversations with upper management whenever I spoke. I wasn't being paranoid. I wasn't imagining things. I was being pushed out of a project I practically built from the ground up. I left his office without a word. I didn't trust myself to speak, not because I'd explode, but because I wouldn't. I'd say something logical, measured, irrefutable, and he'd twist it into aggression, into insubordination, into exactly the narrative he'd been building. I walked through the hallway in a fog. People glanced at me and looked away. They'd heard something. They always do. By the time I reached my desk, I understood something very simple. He wanted me out. He expected me to fall apart. He expected silence. What he didn't expect was what I'd do next. I thought things couldn't get worse after finding my badge burned in my boss's office. I was wrong. That was just the first card he pulled from the stack. The rest came down one by one, slow enough to frustrate me, fast enough to make it clear he'd been planning this longer than I realized. The morning after the badge incident, I went to HR to request a replacement. Straightforward procedure in any normal company. The woman behind the desk scanned her screen, frowning in that way people do when something doesn't make sense. Huh? It says your access was deactivated yesterday afternoon. I felt a muscle jump in my jaw. Without my request? It's logged as security risk. She looked up. Did you report your badge missing? No, I said. My boss did. Part of me hoped she'd hear the problem in that sentence, but she only nodded like that explained everything. Well, he followed protocol then. Unfortunately, we can't issue a new ID until your manager signs the approval form. Of course. Of course it had to be him. I thanked her politely and walked out. I didn't want to, but I found myself rehearsing the conversation in my head. How I'd phrase it, how I'd keep calm, how I'd avoid giving him any ammunition. But when I reached his office, the door was shut, locked, a printed sign taped up. In meetings all day. I wasn't naive. He wasn't in meetings. He just didn't want to sign. He wanted time. Time for the project to move forward without me. Time to make sure upper management got used to the idea that he, not I, was running things. By noon, the damage was already visible. The team group chat, normally active, had gone quiet around me. My pings for updates got short, neutral replies. Meeting moved. We handled it. No tasks for you today. Handled it. Right. I walked into the bullpen anyway. A couple of teammates stiffened when they saw me. Not because they disliked me. They didn't. But because they were afraid. Afraid of being associated with the guy their boss was trying to erase. I approached Aaron, one of the few people I trusted to tell the truth. What happened in the morning briefing? He lowered his voice. Michael said you were taking some days off for a mental reset. I stared at him. He said what? Aaron winced. I know. None of us believed it. But he told upper management you needed space to recalibrate after missing deadlines. I didn't miss anything, I said flatly. I know, he said again. But he's spinning a story. You know how he is. Oh, I knew. Stories were Michael's specialty. Not the kind you told. The kind you weaponized. I sat at my desk, my laptop useless without full access, my hands itching to do something, anything. The project files were suddenly restricted, my commit privileges suspended, my admin view revoked. Piece by piece, he'd taken my tools, my visibility, my ability to contribute. And the worst part, it wasn't a spontaneous attack. It was systematic, thought out, prepared. A week earlier, I might have doubted myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just bad at communication. Maybe I was the problem. But now it was all too intentional. By late afternoon, the email arrived. Subject: clarification of responsibilities. It was addressed to the entire project team. In light of recent concerns regarding workload distribution, I will be assuming direct oversight of the Atlas module previously assigned to my name. Please forward all related deliverables to me moving forward. No mention of me stepping back. No mention that I was kept out. He simply cut my name from my own work like trimming a loose thread. I reread the email twice. My chest felt hot, tight, almost burning. Not rage exactly, something quieter, something heavier. And then came the next blow. At 5:42 p.m., I saw him through the glass meeting room wall, standing with our director, talking animatedly. He had his hands up in that pleading, self-sacrificing gesture he used whenever he played the martyr. The director nodded sympathetically. Then he glanced toward my desk. I didn't look away. Let him see I saw. 10 minutes later, my director stopped by. "Everything okay, man?" he asked, voice careful. "Fine," I said. "You know, if you're overwhelmed, we can redistribute responsibilities. No shame in that." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was astonishing how effective Michael had been in such a short time. He'd painted me as unreliable, without me saying a single word. "I'm not overwhelmed," I said evenly. "I'm locked out." He blinked. "Locked out?" Michael said. Of course he did. I didn't bother arguing. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. When a liar gets the first word, you have to choose carefully, whether you give them the second. "Let me sort things out," I said instead. He nodded and left. He didn't ask further. Why would he? In his mind, the story was already written. But here's the thing. A man can be pushed only so far before something shifts, before silence stops being patience and becomes strategy. That shift happened for me right as I was packing up to leave. My computer chimed. A system notification, a change in network access logs, a timestamp, a name. Michael had logged into my work environment using admin override. Not today, not yesterday, but repeatedly, for weeks. My code, my reports, my entries, my files, modified by him, not just stealing credit, manipulating records, rewriting history. And if he was rewriting things, then the truth still existed somewhere, in the back end, in archived logs, in temp files, in shadow versions the system never fully deletes. I looked at that tiny notification, that quiet line of text, and something inside me settled. The agitation drained out, the confusion, the disbelief, all of it replaced by a clarity so sharp it felt like stepping into cold air. They thought I'd break. I didn't. They thought I'd beg. I wouldn't. They thought I'd disappear quietly. They were wrong. That night I stopped being the hero, not the martyr, not the good employee who tried to fix things diplomatically. I stopped saving people who had never wanted me to succeed. And if Michael wanted a story told, I was finally ready to write my own. I didn't go home after leaving the office that night. I drove around the city instead, letting the lights smear into long-colored streaks across the windshield, while my mind rearranged itself into something sharper than anger. Anger clouds judgment, but clarity, cold clarity, can rebuild a man from the inside out. Around 11, I parked behind the building. Security recognized my car. No one questioned me. I walked through the side entrance with the temporary paper badge HR had printed earlier, knowing it wouldn't open any high-level doors. But that didn't matter. I didn't need access to the labs. I needed access to the truth. And truth lives in the back end. Most people think the database is the heart of a project. They're wrong. The heart is the version history, the unedited, unpolished record of every change, every file created, deleted, modified, overwritten. A man can lie in person, over email, even in reports. But he can't lie to the logs. Not cleanly. And Michael was not clean. I sat down at an empty workstation in the old engineering wing. The lights were motion activated and flicked on in segments as I walked down the hallway, one after another, like a row of dominoes tipping forward in silence. I found a desk with a spare monitor, connected my laptop, pulled up the network map, and began. First thing, I traced every admin override tied to Michael's ID. There were dozens. Some were minor, rewriting descriptions on tasks so they looked like his. But others were catastrophic. At least 8 attempts to alter timestamps so my work looked late. 3 manual edits on progress charts fed directly into leadership presentations. 2 deleted test results that proved his own oversight had caused a delay, not me. And then there were the budget files. If the logs were accurate, and they always were, Michael had approved vendor expenses for services never rendered. Small at first, harmless looking, but they added up. Fraud always starts in small handwriting. The deeper I dug, the darker it got. And the more a strange calm settled over me, not excitement, not fear. Something colder, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Around 1:30 a.m., I found the thing he absolutely did not want anyone to find, a hidden folder tied to his personal shared drive. Not labeled, not indexed, not referenced in the directory tree. You don't stumble onto something like that. You look for it. And I knew the signs. Out-of-sync shadow copies, lingering metadata, a trail of automated backup tasks pointing into empty space. It took me 20 minutes to bypass the lock. Inside were files, dozens, screenshots of our team's private chat channels, selectively cropped, to paint certain people, me especially, as unresponsive or careless. Drafts of emails he had never sent, but clearly intended to use if things went sideways. Emails accusing me of threatening behavior, insubordination, mishandling sensitive data. A fake performance improvement plan dated 2 months earlier, unsigned but fully written out, complete with manipulated metrics. He'd been preparing to fire me long before he burned my badge. And then there were invoices, payments to a consulting firm that didn't exist. Or rather, it existed on paper, but the address led to a UPS mailbox. The owner's name? His cousin. The amounts? Just low enough to avoid raising automatic red flags. That was the moment something inside me tightened into a single, clean line. No hesitation, no debate. If he wanted me out, he'd get his wish, just not the way he imagined. I copied everything, not in one big folder, that would be suspicious. I broke the files apart, encrypted them in multiple layers, and uploaded separate packets into a private secured vault I'd kept since my early freelance days. I wasn't going to leak anything recklessly, but I also wasn't going to let it disappear when he realized he'd left breadcrumbs. At 2:17 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, unhurried, a single person. I killed the screen and listened. The steps stopped outside the room. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. Then a voice. "You're working late." Not security, not a colleague. Michael. I didn't move. He stepped inside, lights flickering on behind him. "What are you doing here?" he asked casually. But his eyes were already scanning the room for open files, active terminals. I leaned back in the chair, trying to catch up on the work you reassigned. His jaw tightened for half a second before the fake smile returned. "I told you to take a break." "You told everyone I was unstable." He didn't deny it. "Atlas needs consistency," he said simply. "And you think sabotaging my access provides that?" He stepped closer. "I think you're tired, burned out. You're making mistakes." "No," I said quietly. "You're creating them." The smile slipped. For the first time in weeks, I saw something real in his face. Fear. Just a flicker, but unmistakable. He didn't know what I'd seen, what I knew, but he could feel it. Some kinds of truth have a weight, even unspoken. "You need to leave," he said finally. "You're right," I said, standing. "I do." I walked past him, brushing his shoulder. He didn't follow. He didn't ask another question. Maybe he thought I'd cracked. Maybe he thought fear had won. Maybe he genuinely believed I was too weak to fight back. I didn't correct him. Because letting a man believe he's still in control makes the moment he loses it that much sharper. Outside, the night felt different, open in a way that made decisions easy. I sat in my car, closed my eyes, and knew exactly what came next. I would walk away from the job, let him think he'd won, and then on my way out, I'd make sure he never had the chance to do this to anyone else. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. I went home before sunrise. I didn't sleep in the way most people mean it. I lay on my back, eyes open in the dark, watching streetlight shadows move along the ceiling, feeling something I hadn't felt since I started working there. Distance. Like the company was already behind glass and I was just looking in. By the time my alarm went off, I was already showered and dressed. There's a strange calm that comes with knowing you're done. Not, I'll see how it goes, not, maybe it'll get better, but done in a way that makes every next step simple. My to-do list for the morning fit on one line: leave. I got to the office a little earlier than usual. The place always felt different before 8 a.m. Less like a company, more like an empty shell waiting for people to fill it with noise and pretending. I walked straight to my desk, powered on my workstation, and opened a blank document. My resignation letter was one paragraph. No flames, no accusations, no monologue. Effective immediately. Thank you for the opportunity. This role is no longer a fit. I printed it, signed it, and set it face down on my desk for a moment. That wasn't the surprise. That was just housekeeping. The surprise was what I did next. I plugged in an external drive I'd brought from home, not the one with the encrypted archive that stayed off their network. This one held something simpler, a curated, stripped-down package. No commentary, no emotional framing, just folders. Access logs, financial irregularities, HR misrepresentation drafts, vendor shell company. Every file renamed with dates and source paths. Then I opened my email. I didn't send it to HR. I didn't send it to my director. They were too close, too busy protecting brand and narrative. I sent it to 3 addresses I'd saved from a company-wide announcement months ago and never thought about again. The external audit firm, the investor relations contact, and the anonymous ethics hotline that swore it routed outside normal reporting lines. All BCC'd into one message. No drama in the subject line. Documentation of potential misconduct related to Atlas Project. In the body I wrote, "These materials are provided for internal review. System logs will verify authenticity. I am resigning today and will not be available for ongoing involvement. But I believe these issues put the project, investors, and employees at risk if not addressed. No response is required." I attached the folders, let my cursor hover over the send button for exactly 1 breath, and clicked. That was it. No explosion, no immediate reply, just the quiet whoosh of an email leaving my outbox. The surprise wasn't loud. It was surgical. I printed my resignation, walked it to HR, and left it on the manager's desk with a short note. Effective today, my name. I turned in my laptop, my sad temporary paper badge, and the access card to the parking garage. No one stopped me in the hallway. No one asked where I was going. On the surface, it probably looked like exactly what Michael wanted. The unstable, overwhelmed engineer quietly bowing out. That's fine. Let the first story stand for a few hours. I was 2 blocks away, sitting in a small coffee shop that smelled like actual beans instead of burned office grounds, when my phone started buzzing. First, a text from Aaron. "Dude, are you okay? Did you really resign?" I answered. "Yeah, I'm okay." He typed for a long time before sending, "Something's happening upstairs." 10 minutes later, "Compliance just walked in with 2 people in suits. They went straight to Michael's office." I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was too hot. I drank it anyway. More messages came in from numbers I didn't even recognize at first. "You picked a wild day to leave. What did you say to them?" "They're pulling Atlas financials right now. Michael looks pale." I didn't reply. I didn't need to be part of the circus. My work was already inside the tent. Around 11, Ray called. He never called during work hours. "You free to talk?" he asked. "Yeah." "Okay. I'm going to skip the small talk. What did you do?" I let a beat pass. "I told the truth," I said, "and I sent the proof to people who get paid to care." He exhaled slowly. "They shut down Atlas for the day," he said. "Pulled everyone into meetings. Someone from the audit firm is here. They had IT pull access logs. It's not looking good for him. He didn't have to say who. Then it's working, I said. Are you coming back in? He asked. No, I said, before he even finished the question. By early afternoon, the text changed tone. Security just walked him out. He tried to say you framed him. They pulled up his admin overrides on the big screen. It was bad. I pictured him in that conference room, watching his own trail of edits and deletions crawl down a projector wall, while the same people he'd been charming for months sat there in silence, realizing how long he'd been playing them. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty. I felt balanced. Around 3, an email popped up from my personal inbox. Company domain. The subject line, opportunity to discuss return. It was from my director. He kept it professional, but the subtext was obvious. They suddenly remembered I existed. They suddenly remembered whose work had actually built Atlas. They suddenly cared about retaining key talent. He offered me my role back. He mentioned a possible title adjustment, a raise, fresh oversight structures, the kind of language people use when they want you to pretend nothing fundamental just broke. I read it twice. I thought about the nights I'd stayed late fixing problems no one saw. I thought about watching my ID burn in a tray on my boss's desk. I thought about being labeled unstable so someone else could climb a ladder with my work under their feet. Then I typed my reply. I appreciate the offer. At this time, I am not interested in returning. I wish the team well. That was it. No extra lines, no digs, no hope of a door left open. They'd had their chance when it mattered. I wasn't going back to be the cleanup crew for a fire I didn't start. The next week, I started interviewing again. Nothing glamorous. Smaller firms, tighter teams, companies that didn't have glossy investor decks, but actually cared whether their systems worked. I told them the truth in a stripped-down way. I left because of ethical concerns with a manager, and I documented my side properly. A few of them already knew my old company's name from the news. A short statement had gone out. Internal review, compliance issues, leadership change. The kind of sanitized language that never mentions names, but everyone reads between the lines. One interviewer smiled over his glasses and said, "You were on Atlas, right? Interesting timing." "Yeah," I said. "Interesting." I didn't send him the files. I didn't need to. My value wasn't in what I had on them, and it was in what I refused to tolerate for myself anymore. Eventually I landed somewhere new, smaller office, less shiny furniture. The first week, my new manager walked me through their codebase himself, pointing out flaws they already knew about. "We're not perfect," he said. "I don't need a miracle worker. I need someone who'll tell me when we screw up." "I can do that," I said. At home, life got quiet in a way that didn't feel empty. No late-night Slack pings, no stomach drop when my phone buzzed after 10 p.m., no mental gymnastics trying to guess who was being told what about me. Some evenings I'd sit at my kitchen table with my laptop closed and realize I didn't owe anyone anything at that moment. No explanations, no defense, no performance. Every now and then news filtered back through friends. Michael tried to spin things at first, claimed I was out to get him, claimed the logs were misinterpreted. But numbers are stubborn, and fraud doesn't disappear because you yell at it. Last I heard, he'd moved on to new opportunities, which is corporate for, no one will touch him until this cools down, if it ever does. Someone asked me once if I felt bad for not warning him, for not giving him a chance to fix it quietly. I thought about the smell of melted plastic in his office, about being told I needed a mental reset while he rewrote my work, about the fake performance plan he had sitting in a hidden folder, my name already written in. "No," I said, "I gave him more chances than he ever gave me." He burned my company ID to keep me off the project. I walked out that night, but I didn't leave empty-handed. I left with the only thing he never understood, how to control: receipts. And in the end, they did exactly what they always do. They spoke louder than him. I sit in that same coffee shop some mornings now, laptop open to a different code base, a new project, a clean login screen that only I and my new team share. Nobody hovers over my shoulder. Nobody edits my history when I'm not looking. My badge hangs from my pocket, unburned, unbothered. It's just plastic. The real access is the line I drew permanently in my own head. I will walk away before I let someone rewrite who I am to make their story cleaner. He tried to log into my life like it was his system to control. I revoked his permissions, for good.